Deborah, how are ETFs being picked up in emerging markets?
There's two different ways to look at them. One is, are they being used locally and how? And the other is, are investors outside of that emerging market using ETFs to gain exposure? So many people are looking at India. What you find is, in India, they are trying to gain greater adoption of ETFs. What you tend to find is it's a market where financial advisors are still incentivized to sell other products. And many of the mutual fund salespeople can only sell mutual funds and they can't transact securities, so therefore they can't use ETFs. ETFs are growing though, but the most popular thing so far in India has been gold. And they're trying to moderate how much is being used. But what you do find is, for many investors outside of India, because you have to apply for quotas to be able to invest, many investors are using ETFs when they want to invest into India. Same would be true of China.
And lack of regulation, this doesn't pose a problem, especially in largely debt-ridden economies. You mentioned China, especially there.
People do have a concern about regulations, but the one thing they like about ETFs is, if I'm an investor in the UK, I can buy an emerging market ETF that is an Irish domiciled fund listed on the London Stock Exchange. So I don't have to go and deal with the local exchange in China or figure out how I could do that. Or the same if it's someone in the US, they can buy a product that's a 40 Act fund listed in the US, and so they'll trade in your local currency, be able to buy in small sizes. So it does give you that reassurance that in Europe, ETFs are UCITS funds, so a highly regulated vehicle that you're buying, and so you do have that ability to trade them on exchange. So they do offer greater liquidity than using a normal mutual fund.
So they really offer access to these kind of markets. So what are the opportunities they represent, and are the risks worth it?
Depending on your benchmark, if you're an institution or a financial advisor, you'll look at what is the allocation to various markets around the world. And you'll take a view, and even deciding not to invest is a view relative to your benchmark. But for many, they do decide they want exposure to emerging markets, or they might pick some markets they want exposure to. ETFs just make it very easy because you can buy exposure for less than £100 to most individual markets or to an entire region. So whether it's the global emerging market, whether it's Asia, Eastern Europe, or even Latin America. So for many, India is one that many see as attractive. I believe longer term that mainland China will be part of mainstream indices at some point, and that will drive a significant amount of money into China, because many investors do follow benchmarks, and if it moves into MSCI or FTSE or S&P, you will see natural flow of a pretty significant level. And I believe ETFs will be one of the tools, because often it's just hard to get English language research on all the different companies. And so using an ETF is an easy way to start getting exposure, to learn about the markets, and eventually many will go to buying individual securities or investing in an active fund.
So finally, which are the economies, the emerging economies to watch then? You mentioned India. Is this the way forward?
I think many are watching India. I think some are a little bit concerned about Korea right now because of what's happening in North Korea. So I think many of the emerging economies are kind of on the watch list, because clearly when there's a concern about the global economies, people tend to be more cautious on emerging and tend to look at the developed. And given we do also have some concerns about what's happening in some of the developed countries like the US, are we going to see a slowdown? People then look at, when the US sneezes, emerging markets tend to catch a cold, right? So they're going to look at that from that perspective of, let's be a little cautious on putting a lot of money into emerging markets while we look at what's happening in some of the developed.